Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Journeys in Analytics Transformation. And with me, we have Himanshu Arora, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shields of Massachusetts. And we are going to continue our conversation from last time on a completely different topic with much more of an emerging topic that is emerging in this world of analytics, which is around agile analytics. How do you bring in agile principles in analytics? So Himanshu, welcome again.
Thank you, Amaresh, for having me here.
Perfect. As you know, Himanshu is the chief data analytics officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, and he's just recently joined his role, like probably a year ago or so. And in his role, one of the first things he's done is bring in the principles of agile into the world of analytics. An area which I think is becoming more and more important and relevant, but at the same time, I think there isn't it's not very well understood. So we wanted to explore a little bit more, Himanshu, on that front. So can you talk to our listeners a little bit about defining agile in analytics? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, Amrish, that's a very good question. In terms of Agile as a methodology, I think if I step back, I first look at Agile as a means of driving an innovator's mindset, right? And it's essentially operating at the intersection of creating things that are desirable, creating things that are technically feasible to do, and have an economic value to someone that can be captured. Right. So if you sort of draw those three circles and the intersection of them, that's what essentially Agile is trying to get us to. A grain deeper, Agile's delivery methodology in which, as we are applying it to analytics, we are holding the duration of a phase of work constant, draw initial scope and adjust scope to fit the duration, focusing always on what is the minimum viable product that we need to drive to get to the essence of what we're trying to solve for here. Upfront, it's not about creating scale. It's not about creating efficiencies. It's about solving the problem in the leanest way possible. And
Himanshu, you talked about analytics as a team sport in the last edition here. Does Agile help you with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the structure around Agile, the flat organizational structure that it encourages and creates, is extremely helpful because it, unlike a typical hierarchical structure, everybody has a clearly defined role, and everybody's opinions and voices are equally valued for their own specific areas of accountability, and we don't spend as much time in meetings or in passing perfect documentation around. Being a team sport, bringing diverse set of skills together, from a product manager to a data scientist to a data engineering, data analyst, visualization specialist, etc. It really helps create a cohesive culture. And because these teams are, for us, and I assume for many others, co-located and operating in a very iterative manner and consistently and constantly testing the work product that they're coming up with, it creates a deeper and more immediate sense of ownership than what might otherwise be feasible in, for example, waterfall.
So make it real. Make it real for our listeners. Talk about what are you doing with an example using Agile, and why is it better?
Yeah, so I'll pick on a business problem that we've been trying to solve for a while, and how it's different in Agile. It's actually a foundational capability of analytics. It's called consumer segmentation. Many of us are engaged and involved in doing that in different ways. And it's something that in various formations across different business units, we as an organization have tried to tackle before. The challenge generally was that bringing together the underlying data required, the analytical skill set required to parse through that data and come up with insights, and then the applicability of it to real world business problems. It wasn't generally feasible to make those three things meet in previous instances. In this instance, we said, look, we are going to dedicate one wave of work um, in, in one of our Agile pods to solving this problem for our Medicare line of business, with the understanding that we will then extend and apply the underlying capability, although with different data and maybe different models required as well, to other lines of business. And what we were able to do then is upfront, because we held the scope constant, so held the timeline constant, we were able to define scope to say, this is what we must get through. And then we brought in what's considered traditional healthcare data. But then we also brought in external data, social determinants of health, other publicly available data that could help us segment the population more granularly, more deeply. And we were doing this in conjunction with the end business users who were going to use this information to impact the go-to-market strategy, and down the line and further upstream, all the way product design, benefit design as well. Which meant that the real feedback that we started getting all the way even from sprint zero meant that we could really hone in on the problems that we were trying to solve for, leveraging member segmentation as opposed to just standing up member segmentation.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So you're basically getting feedback as you do the work rather than kind of saying, okay, I've done the work, now figure out, okay, you have the insights, now go and use them. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Yep.
That's
Exactly. Yeah.
the other thing, which is, I mean, it sounds great, but from a practical perspective, all these people are not like working for you, right? I mean, in a traditional organization, I mean, that creates its own set of challenges. I've talked to other some of your peers, and they said, "Oh, they don't work with the people don't work for me. How do I get them into an agile team? Why would they kind of subscribe to this philosophy?" So, what challenges did you kind of face, and like, how did you overcome to kind of get into agile?
Yeah, I think this is where drive and buy-in from your senior leadership is so important and critical, because that direction was set for us to say, this is the new way in which we are going to operate, and now let's figure out how we are going to do that. And in service of that ambition, we actually chose to create a hub and spoke model as opposed to a decentralized delivery model, or at the other end of the spectrum, a centralized delivery model, which then essentially meant that as we were defining the scope and defining the challenges to be solved for, it wasn't a one-way communication. It went both ways. And the analytical pillars, as we call them in our parlance, were raring to go from the get-go, because they understood that the direction from senior leadership and our momentum as an organization is more and more towards Agile. It's not to say that Waterfall doesn't have a role to play. There are still areas of the organization where Waterfall has and will continue to have. But this is not just analytics, but analytics is at the front end of it. And of course, whenever you are leveraging resources from other parts of the organization, even more so, the focus becomes driving outcomes as early as possible in the cycle, which means how we are organizing the work, the epics and the stories, how we are organizing the sprints around it, when we are doing showbacks and retrospectives. All of that is contingent on delivering value often and delivering it early, which then lends credence to the fact that people have contributed resources to this capability and why they should continue to do so.
Wonderful, wonderful, fascinating. I mean, a lot of our clients are trying to get into the agile journey with analytics, and some of your learnings and some of your ideas here would be super relevant for them. So there you have Himanshu Arora, the Chief Data Analytics Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, sharing some of his great insights. So thank you so much for joining us for this part of the discussion.